Hello, and welcome back to another grateful episode of the Grateful Redhead podcast. I'm Angie Ringler, your Grateful Dead loving host. And if you've not been on the show before or listened, you know that I am all about connecting people who are doing good things for themselves and good things for the planet and somehow finding that cool space in between. So today, I am super excited to have Manuela, the girl gone green, on my show. If I tell you I've been following this girl for years, it is no joke. She has been out there spreading the word of sustainability, how to live a better lifestyle by really doing more with less. I don't know if those are the words that she would use, but those are kind of the words that I would apply to her. So I'm really excited to have her here today. And really, we can get a chance to talk about two Florida girls finding their way through living the low waste lifestyle. So without further ado, welcome Manuela to the Grateful Redhead podcast, and go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. And again, also, I've been hearing about you and your work for 6 years, and it's so cool to see how far we've both come in our own little spaces.
Definitely.
Yes, I know. And the Florida aspect is so important. So I live in Florida. It's dear to my heart. Sometimes I wonder if I should move somewhere else and find more like-minded people, but I know my work is here and so much needs to be done locally. And that is pretty much my next mission, is to work more local projects and sustainability. But yeah, I got interested in sustainability in college and I started traveling. And through my travels, I kind of came across this journey of how can I be more eco-friendly? Because I realized that I was part of the problem and therefore I also needed to be part of the solution. But frankly, I didn't know what that looked like. You hear about sustainability, you hear about the environment, but I thought that meant you needed to be a hippie and live in the woods. I definitely did not realize you could just do your own little things at home. And that kind of started this 6-year journey of exploring what sustainability means to me, what low waste means to me. And it's shifted year by year. There's been years where it was extreme with no trash can, with only minimalist floor beds, like Japanese futons, and then there are years that I'm like, oh, I kind of want more clothes and I want to feel pretty and find sustainable makeup that makes me feel good, and finding what that looks like. And I think that's really the personal journey we all go on. And I like to tell people when they get interested in sustainability, it's your journey is going to be completely unique to you and your lifestyle, because I don't know your circumstances, from your finances to your situation to your time. And there can be a big pressure to have it all or nothing in this industry, when really it's going to be unique to the person.
Especially when we see these beautiful Pinterest boards of the amazing cupboards, all glass, bamboo lids, that whole thing. And it's that, as much as I love looking at that and finding it beautiful, I'll never be there, right? Because I'm reusing all of my things. I'm not buying new. I mean, obviously I'm buying new things of some sort, but I'm trying to reuse as much as I can. And I find that I'm even reusing plastic and reusing things that I feel have a longer lifespan. They may not look as pretty, but they're certainly still functional. And you mentioned you mentioned back in college, what was your major in college?
So actually, I went through 4 different majors. So I started with chemical engineering. Then I went to communications. Then I did a semester of journalism, and then got interested in sustainability, but wasn't interested enough to say, I want to study this in college. So I started taking classes about sustainability. I took sustainable policy. I took renewable energy, which is just a class where we explored all the downfalls of renewable energy and the pros, which is really interesting. And I think has been the class that has helped me most in life, because I could be oh, well, solar power has this and this, but tidal has this and this. So it was really helpful. But no, I ended up graduating early, and I just got a business degree, and specifically in entrepreneurship, which I would just say is a fancy word for creative thinking.
Yeah.
And it was just a really fun way to explore problem solving, which was really the forefront of we studied B corporations, we studied social businesses and how to make things more eco-friendly too. But It was just, how do you solve problems and come up with solutions?
I watched a documentary recently. You mentioned about the solar. I watched a documentary recently, and I wish I could remember the name right now, it talked about like the negative aspects of solar. And it was so many things I never took into consideration. When we talk about clean energy and all of these better ways, kind of the construction and how things have to be made, that we're still using a lot of, chemicals and petroleum based and concrete and all of these things that require a lot of these fossil fuels to make the items that it takes to have solar. And again, it's really become the lesser of two evils, but I found it really interesting to look at it from that perspective. Is that kind of the things that you looked over in that class that you took?
So interesting. Okay. So at the time, for those of you who don't live in Florida, Florida has one of the highest solar potentials in the country. We do have a lot of cloudy days, so we're not number one, but it's still a huge potential. But at the time that I took this class, so this was like 2015, 16, there was this campaign going on throughout the state that said, like, we want to reduce, it was reducing solar or like pro solar. And so they were voting on it. But the ballot or the information that you'd get on the street about both looked identical. So you didn't know who actually wanted solar or who was trying to trick you into thinking it was bad. And there were all these campaigns on TV that like solar was bad. So we were talking about it a lot in class, and we brought in both the sheets and we said, like, we don't know who to vote for. And my teacher, who was, a professional, she's spent all this time on it. And she's like, I don't know which one's which. I can't tell you what to vote on this election because I have no idea. And it was so interesting. But when it comes to solar, and specifically in Florida, we do have solar farms in Florida, and people don't seem to like them, specifically because they've raised the temperature of that area because they're not doing solar correctly. If you have solar on your roof in your neighborhood and there's trees around, and it's not going to make much of a difference. But when you just take a field and you just put these black panels, it absorbs heat. And so it says that in the summer, it can raise the temperature 1 or 2 degrees for that area. We live in Florida. That's a huge jump. It's already hot. So you have these local rural farmers and residents being anti solar because of it, and having these campaigns around that. But also, there's energy that goes into it. But one of the big things that we learned was the construction of solar. And specifically because there was so much lobbying that went in to the original industry that started in the US, that they made so many regulations that they couldn't make solar panels locally in the US, and it had to be outsourced to China where there was no regulations. And therefore, all these panels are constructed for like a shorter lifespan because of how much the oil and gas industry pushed to get rid of solar. So now we're dependent on pretty much only Chinese made solar. And so it's just this like weird cycle of, you realize, okay, they didn't want it. They lobbied for it. They fought for it. And now we're stuck with this, which isn't as great, which now they have that to market to you like, oh, it's bad. So it's just this ongoing cycle and frustration with corporations and the government. And it never ends. It's always something, especially here in Florida.
We're the Sunshine State, right? It seems logical that we should be on the leading edge of how to do solar. I'm not a solar expert by any means, and maybe that's somebody I should have on my show actually, is to really kind of dive deep into why aren't we exploring this a little bit better, especially in, a state like ours, the Sunshine State. Recently, my husband and I went to Michigan, and our drive back, those 2 big welcome to Florida signs on the highway when you're coming in. We were driving by those, and there was like traffic. So we were really slow, and we were driving by, and I realized that there were lights on the signs because it was later in the evening, like around dusk. No solar panel to light those lights. And I remember thinking specifically, really, of all places, you can't put a little solar panel there just to, it's probably hooked to some, mainstream electric. So I find it interesting that the solar discussion in Florida isn't more open about how we can improve it, because I drive by plenty of those fields, like you were just talking about, just panels spread all over the place, flat, pretty much close to the ground. And I can see where the temperature would be an issue in those surrounding areas.
But again, something like that wouldn't be an issue if there was native plants being planted near it, which was the promise that a lot of these companies made. They said, we're going to protect the bees. We're going to plant local plants. We're going to create this whole ecosystem. But then they didn't. And so that's kind of the fallback. It's like, you can do solar. I have a friend who just converted her whole home to solar a few years ago, and she has not had to pay electricity bill, and the company has paid her back. So she gets a bill, like a check. It's not for a lot. It's maybe like $100. Every year she gets a check back because she produced more than she consumed. And that's amazing. And there's so many ways you could do that in your home, in my home, and local businesses. But again, it's the regulations in the state. So you bought a strip mall. Let's say you bought a strip mall and you have Kmart is one of your tenants. You want to put solar and sell that solar energy to Kmart. As a strip mall owner, you can't legally do that. And so it doesn't incentivize these businesses to add in solar because they're not going to make money from it. They're just giving this free electricity to their tenants. If they could sell that and use that, then that would incentivize someone to do it. And so there's all these regulations specifically in the state. And so if you want to look up a resource, there's a great one called Vote Solar. And they're specifically targeting Florida and Arizona because they're the top solar states. And they give resources of when to vote in the election. It's kind of, they can put you on an email list. So you know, hey, this is going on. And then you know who to actually vote for, because sometimes it's confusing.
It is.
And they are, they advocate for solar energy.
One thing I realized, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've realized lately that I can do all that I want to do in my own home and, you know, strive to produce less waste and recycle and compost and do all those things. But it really isn't enough. And I think my biggest eye opener was the recent report that came out, you know, about the whole Code Red, world's on fire, you know, and I realized that these changes have to really start coming from the powers that be, you know, who are much higher up than I am. And the only way to do that is for me to let my voice be heard in those voting mechanisms, getting the right people into office, or even telling those people in office what it is that I believe, sending my message through, you know, voicemails, phone calls, emails, those kind of things. I recently attended I'm a member of Green America, and they really, you know, help people kind of pull together and get out there and be heard. They did it was a webinar, but they called it an actionar, right? The idea is that we did action during the webinar. When I got off of that hour call, I felt amazing because I had actually reached out to our congressman. I had sent a letter to our senators. I had sent an email to Walmart about their refrigeration issues, which, by the way, I had no idea.
I didn't know about that.
Oh my God, go down that rabbit hole and see how scary it is to find out about all the refrigeration units. And I guess Walmart is really the biggest polluter because they have obviously probably the most refrigeration units, but they're older and they haven't done a good job of updating them and swapping them. So I would do a terrible job at explaining it, but when I heard it, it was like so powerful. They had verbiage already written up. All we had to do in the actionar was to copy it. And actually everybody, you know, muted their screens. We went off on our own, did it, and came back together. And everybody said, yes, I sent the email. And it was so simple. They walked us through every step. And that made me feel really good, as opposed to like listening to a webinar and learning about what I should be doing. And then afterwards trying to find time to actually follow through and implement what I learned. So I loved it. And I took that information, put it all together, and we shared it on our social media, like letting people know that, hey, it could be as easy as letting your voice be heard. So I think these moves to letting legislative know how important these changes are is really important. And I'm not sure in Florida that our people are on board with the way that we think. So it does make it a little bit more difficult, but
It really is tricky. And
yeah.
I mean, anyone listening, let this be your inspiration to reach out and try to find a group near you that is interested in action. You know, for me, I lived in St. Petersburg, Florida. I didn't actually end up joining Surfrider, but I was joining Rise Above Plastics Coalition, which was hosted by Surfrider. And through these groups, I was able to learn about so many issues that I had no idea existed. Like, I was only there because I cared about the plastic. But then through Surfrider, I was like, wow, we have all this water pollution. We have this saltwater intrusion, and how can we tackle the poop that's ending up in the ocean? And I started diving into these issues that I, as a citizen that wasn't involved, would never have known about, because no one's really talking about it. Sometimes the local news covers it, but not really. And so these groups really help you, whether it's Sierra Club, whether it's whatever is local to you. They might have a local branch, or, you know, maybe it's not, you know, a lot of towns don't have these groups. So maybe look regionally, because I do think they can really help you get inspired to take action. And a lot of them do provide scripts. And those are really helpful, especially, I don't know about you, but I have a little bit of phone anxiety of calling the phone, like maybe a little bit too close to Gen Z. But like the thought of like grabbing the phone and dialing a number and having someone answer just like is awful to me. So having a script is always really helpful, because I know exactly what I'm going to say and how to say it. But no, I mean, really, when it comes to action, and what I've learned in the last 6 years is that it is this ongoing machine, as you would say. So we have 3 branches that actively are working with each other. We have the individual that has to care. If the individual doesn't care, the rest of the machine doesn't really care either. You have the government that's trying to keep the best interest of kind of the individual, but mostly the corporations. And then you have the corporations who care because the government puts regulations on them, so they kind of have to care, but really they just care about the individual because the individual buys from them. So we see the shift now with Gen Z specifically, and Gen Z has so much buying power when it comes to companies, and these conversations are just constantly coming up in meetings, is that they need to shift, and specifically shift into sustainability, because Gen Z is shifting. Not because they care about the environment, not because the government's putting these regulations, but because this younger generation is influencing the whole household. So them caring about the environment is influencing their parents, their grandparents, and beyond. So these companies are scrambling to just like change the messaging and be like, I'm a good guy, like you can trust me, right? But it's not enough. So we need all individuals to really like care. We need the government to then care because the individuals care, and then put regulations on these corporations so that they also are meeting these. And then the corporations shift because the individual shifts. So like it all kind of flows within each other. And I think that that was a flaw that I saw within this industry pretty early on, is that we really just focused on the individual and we forgot about the other aspects. And there is a very slow turtle slowness when it comes to corporations. And I have tried consulting, I've tried meeting with people, I've tried planting seeds with executives that I'm just like, hey, you know, there's like this flaw in your supply chain. Like you should really think about it and seeing where it goes, because I know that it's going to take them like 6 years to get there, because it's so unbelievably slow. It could be fast, but it just, these systems were built to be like gates. And you have to go from one gate to another. And I think that as individuals, we can feel frustrated because it's like, oh, why is that all on me? Why do I have to care at home when these corporations aren't doing enough? But really, it influences it all. And so it is like you kind of have to hold everyone's hand, but then also like hold your own hand and be like, okay, you can do it. And it's hard. And I mean, it's been harder during the pandemic, I know.
But it feels like dragging people up a hill, you know, and we're trying to multitask, you know, we're still in a very multitask society, and it gets tiring. And, you know, when you said you've kind of done these different aspects like consulting and meeting with, you know, heads of businesses and did you find one area that you felt maybe had more impact than another that is worth still going, that road is still worth going down?
It's tricky. I think in this industry, and specifically how like the social media world has shifted, it's now this kind of burn down the establishment mentality of like it's all ruined. And I realistically, I just don't really feel like that's going to happen anytime soon. And so I don't think that's the best use of energy, is to just like complain about something, but rather actually dive in and help. And I've gotten some backlash for being involved with companies that may not actually be as sustainable as they should be. And I actually think that's kind of exciting, because I've been able to meet with people who actually 100% have no idea what sustainability is. like they're like making millions. Like these are people who make so much money because they're like top executives. They've climbed up the corporate ladder. They've been doing this for 20, 30 years, right? Like they've like built this career. Like at that point, like they deserve to be where they are, whatever their career has led them to. But like they are so unbelievably clueless, because normally, you know, I mean, they're older and they like have been in this bubble and they're just fascinated. You have no idea how like I'll sit down in these conversations, like just casually trying to like kind of like plant seeds, like, and they really just don't know. They don't know. And it's sad, but the reality is I didn't know about any of this either. I didn't grow up with hippie parents. I didn't really care about the environment. Like my mom is a vegetarian, so kind of, but not really. And it, you know, I wouldn't have seen myself in this role. So I can't expect everyone to be there either. So how do these people get exposed? They meet someone who inspires them. They get a conversation. They go down the rabbit hole. But if they're so stuck in their bubble, and we as, you know, activists, as influencers, as people are so anti them that we won't even have the conversation, how are things going to change?
How are things? Because we have to meet people where they are. I mean, none of us started here. Very few people started out knowing so much about the environment and why we had to care and how connected we are. And somebody just told me the term the other day, quantum biology. I've never even really heard that term. I don't think. I didn't even really know what it was, but I for a long time had this feeling of we are all connected in some way. I just didn't know how, you know, I just felt that we all must be connected. You know, the more I learn about plants and the power of plants and mushrooms and how they, you know, weave this web under the ground and speak to each other, like, how could we all not be connected? You know, so it is interesting to find, how do we get in front of those people and start conversations with people who may not even know that this is a big issue, other than the general news moments that they get, right? Of Greta yelling from the podium, and more power to her, by the way, like getting up there and just not having a filter. But the idea is that she's also turning some people off, right? Because she's touching them where it hurts the most, and that's in their wallet, and they do not want to be affected with their profits. So it's a slippery slope that we definitely, and in Florida, like we said, we don't really have a ton of these like stores that are supporting the mission. We don't have a lot of like zero waste stores or refillable stores. I mean, there's even some cities where they have people have vans with like all these products in them, and they'll like go to your home and refill your bottles and stuff. I'm like, that sounds amazing. But are you still over in St. Petersburg?
No. So it is a journey. And I know you're in Mondora?
Yes.
Yes. Beautiful town. That's so stunning.
Yeah.
We have been in the middle of nowhere in rural Florida, kind of closer to like Lake City and Live Oak.
Okay. You're up north. Okay.
Truly in the middle of nowhere. 2,000 people, very, very rural.
Wow.
Nothing there. No, nothing. A Dollar General. That's the extent of the stores. And we're about to move to the Florida Keys tomorrow or Sunday. So we're in the process. There's a lot of moving going on, but that's also very rural and in the middle of nowhere. So it's going to be an experience. But I think that I'm really grateful for the opportunity to live here. And I've had many moments, even last week. I was like, man, should I move to California? I could just have so many friends and vegan food, and it'd be great. And I'd have so many career opportunities, and it would just be like perfect. But the thing that Florida has really, it's been a boot camp in learning other perspectives. You know, I think that for a lot of people, they view America in this blue and red, and they don't see the other side. I think if you live in Seattle, all you know is Seattle, this wokeness, this, language. They just live in this really huge bubble, which is amazing. I would love to live in that bubble, but they live in a bubble.
And they love their orcas, man. Love
right?
the orcas.
Yeah. And then if you live in, Los Angeles, New York, yes, of course you love thrifting. Everything you find at the thrift stores, from Reformation and all these trendy high-end stores. I'm thrifting through dead people's clothes. It's hard to then look when you live in a place that is not cool and shiny, that doesn't have the resources. You really get to know the true America that often is overlooked. And when you look at things like the election and the results and all the things, you realize there's actually a lot more to it that is just not, a lot of people's voices aren't being heard. And I think with the sustainability, it's the same thing. In a lot of these, and you specifically living in a small town, although Mondora is so cute, a lot of people don't make a lot of money. Your income could be $22,000. And at least where we've been living, the only place where you could get employment other than fast food joints is the prison. It's the state-run prison. So, there's not a lot of financial opportunities. And so you have to look at sustainability from that aspect. Your only choice of food is the Dollar General. You're not thinking about your farmer and organic because you don't have a lot of money to spend. And so when you start to see both politics and views from the other perspective, you start to kind of understand. And that's been the really beautiful thing for me living here, is teaching me how can I communicate my values in relationship to someone else's values. So what do the people around me care about? Their only meat source comes from Dollar General. That means if they want to eat well, that means they have to hunt. So they're hunters and they go deer hunting and duck. I don't know what other hunting. I don't know anything about it. But I start having these conversations in their terms. I'm vegan, but I start to talk about conservation through the eyes of their hunting. Oh, have you noticed that the hunting season's different? Oh, you've been noticing that the recent construction has moved the deer from this zone to this zone. How does that make you feel? Do you feel that their habitat has been destroyed? Yeah, you've noticed that there's been less of this animal or this animal. And you have these light bulbs go off in people's heads where they're oh, actually, I kind of care about the environment and I care about sustainability. I just don't like the image of this liberal view that's angry that's been in my head. And so then you're able to get them involved. And in St. Pete, we were able to get so many fishermen involved in the plastic ordinance that we passed because we had the conversations through their eyes. They're fishermen. They like to fish. I don't eat fish. I don't fish. I've never gone fishing. But I go, hey, have you been seeing that there's a lot of plastic in the ocean? Oh yeah, you've been reeling up a bunch of balloons. Wow, tell me about it. Yeah, every time you go, you end up pulling out a balloon. Wow, yeah, isn't that really frustrating? Oh, well, we're doing this meeting about just that, about plastic. Oh, you cut up a fish and there was plastic in it. And you're able to get these, Republican fishermen who you could never see joining this activist group with a bunch of
You're finally talking their language and they're I get it, right? I get it.
Their language. And then you find this beautiful synergy of realizing that, yes, there's this politic pull from one side to the other, but in reality, we all have very similar but different pain points.
Yeah.
And you're able to see things from their side. You're able to really bound together and create change. And that's what we did. We got a complete group of Republican city council members to vote yes on a plastic ordinance, only because
Fantastic.
We had their people on board. We had a ton of people on board ranging from age 6 and beyond. And it was so many amazing activists that came together, and I cannot take credit for this at all. But it was really because those conversations got started in ways that often this industry likes to divide and ignore the fact that there is a whole group of people that are not being spoken to.
And I think you hit it when you said, look, you're talking to them of what their pain points are. And that's when people can relate. And I think that's what turns people off a lot to this, the zero waste lifestyle is that, it's not doable for most people. When people are constantly talking about just go to the store and fill up your bags with, your bulk beans and no. The last time I was at a Dollar General, they don't have a bulk section. So, it is a little frustrating, but meeting people where they are is really important. So I'm glad you brought that perspective up for sure. When you mentioned going to the Keys, I want to make sure that I introduce you to a friend of mine, Dee Lucas, down there. She started another branch of Living Towers, which is all hydroponically grown produce on vertical gardens, and they have a whole facility down there.
Amazing. Yes. I want to be connected to everyone. I have no friends, so please. But Perfect. We are actually moving on to a sanctuary. It's the most random thing, but it's this really sweet couple and they're trying to do a homestead. And so we're going to go down and try to help them set up the homestead. So we are moving.
That's going to be amazing.
Driving back. I'm in my hometown of Sarasota right now, and I'm driving back north. I might have
lost you on our connection.
And we are packing up a U-Haul with fruit trees and chickens.
We'll just wait 1 second.
And then driving 9 hours down. To me.
Okay, I think we're reconnected.
Okay, did I lose you?
So yes, I'll introduce you. I'll make an invite over email probably with you and Dee, and you can see how far you are from her in the Keys. I think you'll absolutely love her place.
Thank you so much.
And then she's already got a great connection down there because she's all about, food is thy medicine and that kind of perspective. So I think she'll be a nice person for you to hook up with down there. You. Awesome. So, we talked a little bit about Florida and how it connects and everything. I want to kind of bring it a little bit more closer to home and ask you, what have you found kind of the most difficult thing at home for you to deal with at home to reduce your waste?
There were seasons where I was really good and to the extreme. And I think I became very unhealthy because I was so obsessed with trying to be zero waste and really try to reduce all my plastic and be vegan to the extreme that I wasn't really taking care of myself or eating the right things. And, right now during the pandemic, there are pretty much no way to get things zero waste when it comes to food packaging, and there's a lot more packaging involved. So I've relaxed a bit on that end. But I think at the end of the day, sustainability for you is going to look so different because I don't know your finances. And it'd be really, it wouldn't be good for me to say, oh, you just spend $1 extra on this bamboo toothbrush when I don't know your situation in the same way that, I can't give you that advice, but really there's so many ways to be sustainable that don't require money. There's so many ways.
Not really to give advice, but just out of curiosity, is there something at home that you struggled with, or maybe let me even rephrase that, something that you're doing that you wish people knew more about that you feel is making an impact. So let me share with you one thing that to answer that question for me is that I use Tinkle towels, and I feel like everybody in the world should be using Tinkle towels. We buy a case of toilet paper once a year. The case comes in a cardboard box or all wrapped in paper. A case of 48 rolls gets us through a year because I'm using Tinkle towels, little cloth, towels that I use, throw them in the washer. I mean, they have essentially replaced my Tinkle toilet paper use for the past many years now. I feel like that's something people don't talk about enough, but I feel like it's making a huge impact of the resources that I'm, able to cut out of my life. Is there anything like that you feel, you're doing?
I mean, genuinely, I think the thing that makes the most impact that I currently do is just composting. And I know that it doesn't sound sexy and it's pretty boring, but genuinely, not throwing the earth in the trash can is the most eco-friendly thing you can currently do. And it's an adventure of diving in, and it's has a learning curve, and there's always the journey, but there are amazing resources out there that can help you. But I really think that that is just crucial because most of our trash is compostable. Most of the things we throw away.
It really is. So let me share with you that I interviewed a girl maybe 2 weeks ago. She told me about, it's called sharewaste.com. I still have the note right here, if you can believe it, because I'm so interested in learning more about it. It's called sharewaste.com. And it's a way for people who compost at home to be able to share their compost with people maybe on the road or your neighbor who doesn't have the ability to compost. Or I thought that was so fascinating. Are you familiar with that?
I will add one more resource to that because it's very similar. They're both kind of the same thing. It's called makesoil.org. And it's almost the same platform that it connects you to other people composting in your area, and you can drop off your food scraps.
Love that. That is so good. I love it. This is why I do this podcast, honestly, because we could never share these kind of just general off the cuff kind of thoughts in an email, or just because I see your post on social or you see mine on social, like these. This is what I love in this format of just like you and I sitting down, having a cup of tea at a coffee shop. Like this is just the natural conversations that would come out. And I really love them. So let me ask you, are you nervous? Or are you hopeful about the future of the planet?
I think it depends on the day.
Oh, that's the most beautiful, honest answer I've heard.
I think I would love to say that I am the biggest optimist and climate optimist, but I definitely have days where I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? I'm at that age where my body is wanting children. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that because I don't know what the state of the planet is. But now I have a niece. So I'm like, well, I have to keep going because my niece is here and she deserves winter in Colorado because they haven't had snow in Colorado and it's the end of November and that's unheard of. And so there are moments where I start to panic. It's a bit of my personality, but I do think that we're working towards it in a way that I didn't actually expect. So, I started this 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, I was the crazy girl bringing my own utensils to the store and, asking for no straw. And I would constantly have people say, why don't you want a straw? And I would have to have this conversation about straws and, educate people. And now people are like, they're biodegradable straws for the turtles. And everyone knows. And it's so mainstream. And yes, it's just a straw. And I know the conversation is that it's a distraction. But really, I think that it's opened up conversations that we didn't have before. I see sustainability in the mainstream. I see all these companies scrambling to be like, I'm a B corporation. I care about things. Like they're trying. I don't think we are doing enough on a larger scale, but really, I do think there's been a big shift and there's more conscious intentions. But again, am I just in a bubble? Because sometimes I leave my bubble and I realize no one's actually changed. So I don't know, it's tricky. I do have faith in the future, but there's gonna be a need to keep going. And it's tough because sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes it's like, oh gosh, this is enough. Like I definitely feel that I've been in this a lot, and my entire life is this. My career, my friend group, everything in my life kind of revolves around this, and that's exhausting.
It is.
And there are moments where I'm like, should I just get a normal job? Should I just go do something else? Like I need some space where I'm not thinking about doom and gloom
all the time.
But then there's the exciting moments where you meet a 10-year-old girl who just lights up and tells you how excited she is because she watched your YouTube videos and she's doing all the sustainability things. And you're like, oh my gosh, like you got to keep going and doing this.
Right.
And I think that everyone's going to find their mission, their drive, whether that's your children or whether that's your community or nature. You're going to find something and a reason why you want to keep going.
So today, I would say today you sound hopeful.
Well, there you go.
But you're right. It is a matter of us, finding that balance. Some days, when I'm working on packaging for my product line and there's products that I have in mind that I would like to roll out, and I can't find the right packaging, because that's really what it comes down to, right? It's like we can use all the natural good ingredients we want, but if it's packaged that's in something that's going to live on this earth for thousands of years, well, then what good have I done? And I always say, if I just didn't care, it would be so much easier. But that's not going to change. It's obviously who I am, ingrained inside, and I'll continue to care. But I'm with you. Some days are better than others. So I'm a huge music fan, as you probably guessed by the name of my podcast. Grateful Dead happens to be right up there as my faves. So who's your favorite band? And have you seen anybody live lately?
Oh, I actually just got to go to the Swanee River and got to see was it called? The Roots Revival. It was Bluegrass Festival. And it was the first, honestly, I've never been to a music festival. And it was actually really fun. And I got to see a bunch of different bands that I didn't know. My fiance is also a huge Grateful Dead fan. So he's been introducing me to all kinds of live music and diving in. He's been very much challenging me to learn an instrument. I'm not quite there yet, but it was really fun to just, I don't know, especially because of the pandemic, to just be outside and listen to music was so nice.
So is he turning you on to the Grateful Dead? Are you becoming like a Deadhead?
Oh, between bluegrass, that, and also I wouldn't say mainstream country, but certain country. I've been having like a music lesson. I definitely have been listening to things I never thought I would listen to, but I'm like, oh, I dig it. And now I know the lyrics to things because we have to listen to them so much in road trips. And I'm like, nice. Okay, I know all these songs now.
I like him already.
Yeah, I think you would.
That's so cool. Well, yeah, live music, I'm definitely missing some shows, so I hope that we're kind of getting back to that norm again. But Swanee has always been a place I would like to go. They have some amazing music festivals up there. So is there anything else that you want to share? Any kind of quick tips that you'd like to share with people before we close up our talk today, to give some inspiration to the listeners and myself?
Yeah, I would say not so many quick tips. I would say that the best thing that you can do in your life right now is to just kind of audit yourself. Similar to how if you were in finance, if you were trying to make a budget, you would look at your finances and you would see where's your money going to, where's your energy going to. The same thing with your life. I think that we get the opportunity to say, what am I shopping? What am I buying? Or where's my actual energy going to? And then you tweak it from there, because it's not about changing your life overnight. It's not about saying, look at me, I'm zero waste and my house looks perfect and I have all these beautiful jars. No, it's about saying like, hey, as an individual, we too have a responsibility, and what can we do? Whether it's one little thing or a bunch of big things, and you won't really know where to start unless you look inward and just kind of take a note, go through a week of your life and just journal. See like, oh, did I buy this and what packaging? Did I buy more of this than I consumed? Did I throw out all the broccoli after the end of the week because I actually hate broccoli and I'm just trying to convince myself that I like it? Just go through and be honest with yourself, and then you'll be able to figure out, different ideas. Maybe you do have a little bit extra money and you can buy something for your home, or maybe you don't and you just need to reuse things, and then we can kind of take that on.
Good advice. Very good advice. So, Manuela, I just want to thank you so much for making time today and for us finally getting a chance to talk face to face. This is really very cool. And I hope we get a chance to do this more often. So where can we find you? And do you have any projects right now that you want to share, or any organizations that you're supporting that we would find of interest to?
Yes, you can find me at The Girl Gone Green. I am transitioning right now through a move, so no projects for the end of the year, but I'm excited to dive in next year and get to know the Key West community, or the Keys community, and dive into projects maybe in water, especially with the coral reefs down there. So
yeah, that's really important. Well, thank you again for being on the show. And for those who are listening, if you know somebody amazing like Manuela, please reach out to me. I would love to get the opportunity to have them on my show. And until we meet again, please be kind to each other and love one another. Peace out. So before you go today, I want to thank you for listening to this episode. I've built a business on formulating natural household cleaning and body products without plastic bottles or plastic packaging. So if you'd like to give them a try, head on over to wastefreeproducts.com and use promo code GratefulRedhead for 10% off your entire order. Thanks for listening.